Today on the Cameron Journal podcast, we are joined by Evan Turk. He is the CEO of American Rights Alliance. He is a former attorney to President Donald Trump, and he has written a great book about asset protection by design. We might get into that at some point, but he is out there protecting people's civil rights through the legal system and how the legal system gets weaponized against people. I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about the current issue du jour. But we'll be interesting to find out more about his background, how I got into all this. So, welcome, Evan, to the Cameron Journal podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, well, let's just start from the beginning. Tell us a little about yourself, your book, and what you do.
Okay, I that's a great question. First of all, again, my name's Evan Turk. I'm an estate planning, asset protection, delve into family law when it goes to preserving wealth, preserving assets, and I wrote a book called Asset Protection by Design. It's now about 12 years old. And so I got the desire going through divorce one and two for my own self. The best revenge is I had to learn how to protect my wealth and also wrote a book about it to learn how to do it, make money off of a divorce. And the book is coming out and it's called either Divorce Your Spouse, Not Your Wealth, or I prefer Divorce Your Wife, Not Your Money. Yet to be determined.
Both of those are a lot of fun. Divorce your spouse and not your wealth is that's good. I like that. But yes, well let's dive into the wild world of asset protection because there's a lot of people that definitely, and I'm sure you've known them being in law, they know nothing about these things. They're making great money, they're saving all this type of thing. Relationships fall apart, and all of a sudden, years of work and tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars are suddenly flying out the door, sort of thing. And it's a huge setback. So walk us a little bit through what does that mean in a marriage environment, all that sort of thing. How does that all work? What are the dangers and difficulties?
Well, it's we have to be realistic. Statistically speaking, you wouldn't get into a car with a 50% chance that you'll get into an accident, right? But you get into a marriage with a 50% chance that there will be a devastating event, which is divorce. And my law firm focuses on typically the male, but not necessarily. It's more of the breadwinner of the this situation itself, the one who has makes the money that controls the wealth, but also is most vulnerable. So, Asset Protection 101 in Florida and in most states in the country states that the best asset vehicle you have your money jointly held by you and your spouse. That's great, except one thing they're missing. The biggest creditor in your life will be your spouse. So, um, people think their marriage is perfect until it's not. So, we take a more pragmatic viewpoint of wealth design, utilizing a lot of family structures with the family, children, grandchildren, if there are, nieces, nephews, aunts, you name it, and plan a foundation for your wealth. It's multi-generational and it will stand the test of time in the event of divorce, typically.
No, that's quite important. There is a divorce lawyer that goes around and he talks about why marriages fail a bit and all this type of thing. And not that you do divorces and all this type of thing other than the asset end of it, but in your view, why do a lot of relationships fall apart? Because the trope is it's always money, which is ironic given what you do. So I thought I'd ask why do you think marriages fall apart most of the time?
It's my respect, infidelity, but things lead up to infidelity. So, if the last person you're going to have intercourse with for the rest of your life is your spouse, and that spouse decides to not share in that understanding, then infidelity is a likely outcome. And then the person who commits the infidelity is usually the one that looks bad. But there's always a fundamental reason behind the scenes that gets that. And infidelity is a big one because, from a male's perspective, a male is a visual person, and their value has to tie in with sex often. And if they don't feel like they have that ability to entertain or interest their spouse, or they're not interested because of just long-term, slow, but over time, dysfunction in the marital household, and there's no clear communication. And communication is not what you normally think. It's not like, oh, we need to talk. It's more of the subtleties. It's how the woman feels in the relationship and how the man feels in the relationship. And what makes the woman want to provide more is not what you would think. It's not even wealth. It's feeling heard. It's also feeling, most important, safety. And not meaning that the man is going to protect her from intruders, which is a given, but safety around not having to worry about financial matters and making sure that um, they can, continue living in a financially comfortable lifestyle. And when all those things aren't met, then there are problems, and that's the number one reason for divorce. And yeah, it is finance, but what's the underlying reason for the finance? Is it because the one spouse lost his job or her job, or is it more so the inability to provide safety? And that's, really could mean you ask 10 people, you'll have 10 different reasons what that or definitions of what that means is. But what's most important is your relationship with your spouse and how each other feels safe and heard.
Yeah. As someone who is looking to get married in the next couple years, um, what's your biggest piece of advice to my listeners are run a little bit younger. We're very good in the 25 to 44, which is split between 25 to 34, 35 to 44. But I just lump them together, 25 to 44. And obviously being millennials, some of us are a little late to the marriage party because life has the last 20 years have been fun. So some of us are a little late to the marriage party. Especially as someone like I'm 38 years old in a couple months. I own Widgery Omni Media, which is the parent of the Cameron Journal and the Cameron Journal Academy and all this sort of thing. What's your biggest piece of advice for those of us who are hitting a career stage, hitting a career stride, finally got this relationship thing figured out? What's the advice for those of us at that stage of life?
All right. The mistake I made, so I could speak from the heart,
Yeah.
is my first wife, my first spouse. She's a great person. But I decided to get married because was in my early to mid 30s at the time, and I wanted to settle down. I had a checkbox situation. This is who I want to marry. This is what that person looks like, what that person is capable of bringing into the marriage, same religion, same value system, great parents, all of those things. But we're missing the one thing was the connection. And if you don't have that connection, nothing else is relevant. So when I went and got divorced, it was not if I was going to get divorced, let's wait 10, 20 years, raise children in a household that's not very loving. I had to make a very hard decision. And I take full accountability of it. But the reason why I got into the divorce was because I married the person not for the right reasons, but for the fact that I was checking boxes and I hit a specific age. The second
Mm.
marriage, I did the complete opposites. The other mistake I made was, I had married someone who was a complete and total narcissist. And I fell for the narcissism at the beginning. And it's called
Love bombing.
love bombing. Yes, love bombing. And I also warn your audience of the love bomb. And I think there's a lot more narcissists now than there was ever in history. And society has really allowed for that and encouraged that. And people have benefited from narcissism where um, in years past, generations past, it wasn't a good survival instinct, and now it's become one because we're a me first generation or society. So to
Yes.
answer your question is marry because you have the connection and you know and make sure that you've had a serious, significant fight with that person because you have to know once you have that major fight, how to handle that fight and how do you handle the relationship after that fight. Because love is great, but after the first 2 years, that emotional connection changes and then it gets dull for a moment. But then what creeps in is a new type of love, which is the core of love, the foundational love, not the sexual interest love.
No, that's a no, I think that's very important. I definitely fell a little bit into the checkbox situation. I do sometimes feel like I kind of gotta hurry things up because, getting to 40 should be married by
Mhm.
now sort of thing. Like let's speed
Yeah.
this let's speed this along sort of thing. Um, and yeah, some of my friends are that's freaking people out in my life a little bit. But no, I think that's especially, I mean, I would say definitely for, the younger end of my audience that is like, oh, I need to be married before I'm 30. No, you don't. I wasn't married before I was. No, 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 you don't. I agree. The quality of the person that can, can you get in a fight and get out of it and still have a relationship? All that type of thing is very, very important because that's going to happen more than you think. My my girlfriend and I have had a long standing battle over. This sounds stupid, but anyone who's married for a long time will know dish soap. I love Mrs. Meyer's all natural essential oils. She's like, just give me the Dawn. Like, and she wants to do the least work possible. She wants to spray a bit, do one or two scrubs, and it should be clean, sort of thing. Like, she wants to do the least amount possible when it comes to anything that has to be hand washed or can't fit in the dishwasher or whatever have you. I don't care. I love the soap that I love to use and all this sort of thing. And Thanksgiving a couple years ago, we had a huge thing about that. And it's like that, yeah, you have to know how to recover a fight about money, but also be prepared for fights about dish soap. You will have so many issues with something as stupid as dish soap. And her and I've had a running joke that I listened to some other people's relationships, and I got off the phone with a buddy one time, and I he told me about everything, and I walked out to the living room and I said, babe, let's continue arguing about dish soap. That sounds so much better than what I just got off the phone hearing. Like, let's continue to keep it at that level. We'll continue to
Exactly.
argue about dish soap. By the way, put that on the list. We need some more Dawn. Like it's so yes, that is definitely true. When it comes to prenups, all this type of thing, sometimes they're effective, sometimes they're not. Should you have one? Does it matter? What's your view of that sort of thing?
It does matter. It's very important. Um, because then you realize that each other are entering in the marriage for the same reasons. But let me share with you when it doesn't matter. There are
Mm,
times it's when your spouse has a lot more money than you. Do not sign the prenup, right? Unless
yeah,
it's an insistence. I mean, be careful what you wish for. But the other time is really when you both come into the financial situation pretty much at the same level financially.
yeah,
And now you're working together to build your empire. And
yeah,
how do you articulate what is yours, what is not yours if you pretty much have the same financial wealth or within $100,000 of each other, and your ability to earn a living is approximately the same. So, but especially in a second marriage, a third marriage, especially when one of them is entering a marriage and there's children from the prior marriage or a prior life. And, because that's really when it's most difficult is, I got married, I had two children of my own. Then I got married to someone who had four children. We were like a modern day Brady Bunch, right? And what happens in the divorce? How do you split assets? If something should happen to me, um, now it goes to surviving spouse and something should happen to her, it now goes to her children just as much as it goes to my children. So you really have to put those plans in place, not because you don't trust the other, but because you don't know what the other is thinking, and you haven't thought clearly yourself as to what is and isn't needed in order to deal with those issues that you really don't think about. It's not just divorce.
No, no, that we had a situation in our family where someone was kind of like, they had separated and were living apart, and she's kind of like, oh, maybe we should get a divorce, and some of the family was kind of like, well, that may not make financial sense. Do you guys need to get divorced, or are you just happy living your separate lives and you guys are old and one of you will pass soon enough and all this type of thing? They didn't end up getting a divorce, and as it turned out, it was actually really good that that family member died with him as his wife because it made a lot of things a lot easier and she was able to navigate that a lot difficult, and the kids got all they'd already agreed her money goes to her kids, and they met in their 50s, so her money goes to her kids, his money goes to his kids, that's separate sort of thing, and it actually ended up all kind of working out. So yes, it all gets very complicated, and I think that's why, like, kind of one of the reasons I think this is an important conversation is just being like, don't don't be afraid to have these conversations. And I would dare say if you're not ready to have these conversations, are you ready to get married? That's, I think, maybe an uncomfortable thing that a lot of people don't want to admit or talk about either.
The one thing I think is even more difficult is that it's just a tough subject to broach because you want to get married to the person, but you know by broaching that subject, it's going to be a hell of a fight. And then you have to say, is it worth it? And you believe at the time of marriage that you're going to be married forever. You don't think it's going to fail. So you say, why am I going to start a fight when I don't have to? And the
Right.
first marriage I entered into, I was right. I didn't even graduate law school yet. I was in my final year of law school. So financially, it didn't make sense. It wasn't like, we were same family structure, same wealth. I mean, my income was much higher. But the second marriage, the issue there was I didn't have a prenup, but I made sure we had a postnup, which is, a prenup during the marriage. It's called a postnup or anti-nuptial. Just don't want to assume everyone knows.
Yeah.
Um, and that was the easiest divorce I ever had because at that time, my significant other um, was in a position where she knew where she was heading and what she wanted, and we weren't doing well. And I knew that if we were going to succeed, I needed something in writing so that stress and that pressure went away. And the divorce was simple. We had no kids.
Right.
So what we ended up doing was I filed it, let's just say I filed it January 1st. By like before March 1st, we were officially divorced. It was the quickest divorce ever. And the only reason why we were able to do that was the postnup. And the other thing people don't realize when you have a prenup or a postnup, I mean, you don't spend most of your money on the other spouse often. You spend your most money in the fight. Legal fees are expensive. And then there's experts and there's mediators and there's every attorney in family law. The one thing that you have to realize, family law, it's such an emotional tie and you get so it's involved with the trusting of the first lawyer and you think that lawyer is going to be able to do a miracle. And then all of a sudden that miracle doesn't happen and there's quite disappointment. So you'll see in family law three or four attorneys from the beginning to the end. It's quite frequent, and it's because it becomes very expensive and it's a lengthy process. And the one attorney can't clearly articulate the expectation, or even so, the person doesn't want to hear the truth. They don't want to live in reality. It becomes even more expensive because there's additional fees and then attorney fees that don't get paid and then settlement issues, all this stuff. A most basic divorce now could cost over $100,000. It's quite an expensive process with people litigating at 500 plus an hour on things that really shouldn't be litigated because you're spending dollars to save cents.
Also, people sometimes get emotionally tied into certain things or assets, or, I knew a guy who they were in court back and forth 6 months. They owned like five houses. And she absolutely, there was this one particular house that she absolutely wanted. That was 6 months of lawyers. And I'm kind of like,
Yeah.
oh, that sounds tedious. I'm kind of like, after the second month, though, after I saw the bill, I'd be kind of like, I don't love the house that much. I can't afford to love this house that much. Like, it's like I'm gonna sell the house I'm fighting for to pay the lawyer that I paid to fight for the house. This gets very circular very quickly. So it's
Yeah.
but I know that people get very emotionally emotionally tied to things. So it's um
I
it's a
just
difficult thing.
my favorite story, he just brought I don't know why it was just brought to my forefront of my mind is I worked on this one case and we were able to settle it in weeks. And
Yeah.
typically when clients have significant wealth, I mean 20 million and up, 40 million and up, they're like the perfect candidate for an attorney because these divorces take forever because they have the financial means, and typically one of those two people are very crafty. That's how they generated their wealth, or they're a trust fund kid, so they don't have the value of money. So the lawyers do really well in those types of cases. And one of those cases, we were able to settle it in like 2 or 3 weeks. And my client gave the spouse agreed on $20 million, which um, she was pretty happy with. And I was thinking to myself, this guy hated her so much that he gave her $20 million so he can never see her, hear from her, or even think of her ever again. And what we focused in on in that situation was not so much the money, it was just a no contact. It was I will give you all of this, but you just need to go away. Because he realized that he can make a lot. He can make, if his net worth was cut in half, he can make a lot more going forward without the noise. And he ended up doing so. His company went public and things went exponentially well. And a lot has to do with what we do is just really look at it. I try to look at it as a business transaction. Like these clients of mine are really good business owners and entrepreneurs, and they see money when others don't. So then it's my job to convince them how to do that in their divorce. I mean, nothing ruins a business more than someone going through a divorce because when I went through my divorce, before the divorce itself, the emotional ups and downs with being with a narcissist caused me to, if I had 3 or 4 nights of sleep more than 4 hours, that was a good week.
Yeah.
Think about how you bring that energy into your life in the workforce and how you support your family. It's nearly impossible unless you have a job where you can work on autopilot, but most people can't.
No, I've definitely been in that situation. I sometimes feel like my business and my career as a writer and podcaster and an executive at a media startup is a big relationship killer. Its relationships are surprisingly time consuming. I work in a business that is surprisingly time consuming. And I lost more than one dating situation, lost more than one potential relationship because people took one look at my schedule and were kind of like, haha, no, thank you. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's no, I mean the reality is if you're a high output, in a high demand career profession, um, Yeah, I think relationships in general are quite difficult. And if you're in a relationship where you're not sleeping well, you're not taking care of yourself, all this type of thing, that is that's yeah, performance is gonna suffer, you'll make less money, all this type of thing. It begins to have knock-on effects that are quite tragic. So
Yeah.
it's yeah, no, absolutely. I want to turn around to civil rights and all that fun stuff. One of the
Okay.
talking points I was sent over was civil liberties in the Trump political environment. Obviously, we're recording this on the 23rd of January, 2026. Obviously, we have our situation in Minnesota and pretty soon in New York and Chicago, and they're rooting out corruption. ICE is capturing anybody with a big net like a cartoon, it seems like. What does the civil liberties environment look like with Trump and what's going on? Kind of regardless of how we feel about it or what we might think about the policies of it, what's the landscape looking like from your view?
It's quite interesting. So let me take a step back so I could share with the listening audiences too uh, what we do. I have a charity called the American Rights Alliance. It's a 501(c)(3). It's kind of, I call it the ACLU for America, not for special interests.
Mm,
So what we try to do is focus on saving the values of America predicated on a foundation of God first and family, and think what's in best interest of those two things. So if you take, it doesn't matter if you're religious or not, but if you take it helps if you are, but if you take a biblical approach to civil justice, and if you think, what would God do? What would Jesus do? What would whoever you pray to do is the most righteous pattern of living with dignity. How would you address that as a society? And where do you value rules and what laws are capable of being broken? And if they are capable of being broken, then why aren't we changing the laws to say that they're no longer valid? So when it comes to what's happening in Minnesota and throughout this country, in particular, um, governments that say that it's okay to break the federal law because on moral conscience it's the right thing, rather than legislating and trying to change the laws through Congress to say, no, this is a process if you want to, come into this country, without, permission, we're going to look at it different. But it's all predicated on false narratives. You know, selective countries that they have amnesty and selective countries that and selective enforcement, and then you have states that allow these people to vote. If not, they're counted on census, and on the census that influences political persuasion. So you have politicians that aren't honest about why they want illegals here in the first place. And then you have to balance that out to, is this in the best interest of this country? To have people that haven't been vetted, they could easily be terrorists. We had 9/11 come in. I mean, do we have to have another 9/11 before we realize that we should know who's living in this country and who our neighbors are and whether or not they um, are here with a valid reason? I mean, all of these things are the foundation as to what's happening. So then you have ICE, which they have a mandate, and then you have these states and cities that um, make it nearly impossible for people who have broken the law to be sought out. And then you have it's typically the same type of person, demographic that's fighting and putting themselves, they're not protesting anymore. They're becoming part of the problem. I mean, when you see an ICE agent and you see them taking somebody out, there's ways to protest, but you don't put yourself in the line of fire. And then inevitably, if you continue doing this time and again, there's going to be bad seats. There's going to be someone who's going to get killed. It's just inevitable. So you have to realize, how do you fix that? Do you let these protesters continue doing things that's not really a protest anymore? It's more of a riot. I mean, is that how we stick up for what we believe in a civil society? Do we allow people to go into a church where they have nothing to do with the fight to disrupt that service so that you can have your protest? Also, you have to ask who's funding this. Are these people really genuinely protesting because they believe in it, or is it a job and they're getting paid? And if they're getting paid, um, is that considered a protest anymore? I mean, there's so many areas. And the thing I love is we all come with our opinions and we all have them. But you have AI right now that for every opinion you have, if you're anti-ICE, say you could put in AI, give me a reason why as an anti-ICE, that I should understand the other side. Give me all the reasons in the foundation. Try to convince me why I'm wrong. And it's quite surprising. It's quite effective how you could get persuaded to be on both sides of any argument just about. And there's only like a few exceptions that I can't understand. One is squatters' rights, just as an example. I don't understand how you can just break into someone's house and then refuse to leave, and the law will support your decision. But for most part, what the society is split on, um, I think it's just more of each side drinking the Kool-Aid, and more of the leaders that are unwilling to meet in the middle. Now you have the fringes of both parties that are highly influential. And this is unprecedented times, and our civil liberties are really taking, a back seat, and we see this going on in other countries. Our neighbors up north, more importantly, more scary is in the United Kingdom. In England, you could go to jail with something that was once considered free speech. And if it happens there, it sure will happen here if we don't fight for it. And we don't fight for the speech you agree with. It's the speech that you disagree with that you have to fight the most for. And the freedom to be able to say it, because that's public discourse. That's how you get change.
No, absolutely. It's I definitely the UK is getting quite bad, which is kind of to be expected for a country with an Official Secrets Act that does not have nearly the levels of transparency we do in the United States or the requirement for it.
Mhm.
And free speech is not protected in any part of the documents that the UK calls a constitution that they don't have. Sort of thing. It was a very different system. And that is I think it's the desperation. I think a lot of that comes in British society. What's said, what's published, what's out there has always been a very sensitive subject. And you don't have to go back that far to understand that cultural dynamic. And I think the openness of social media and the fact that all social media comes from the United States or China, I think has been honestly, I don't think culturally the British know how to deal with platforms where you can say whatever the hell you want to say, because that's not true culturally on the street. I've lived in Britain for a while. That's not true culturally on the street. There is an idea of antisocial behavior. The standards of public decorum are different than they are in the United States. And I think a lot of those laws and that kind of crackdown is the state trying to ham-fistedly, and it's very ham-fistedly reinforce British cultural notions about what's appropriate in public. Um, and one could say good for them. They're trying to control the contagion that is social media. I tend to take the view of no, the world has moved on. The days of control, the days of top down is passing away. The future is a flat disk, and that requires a big change in culture. Canada's just as bad, and we saw that in the pandemic with the trucker protests and how that was treated, how that narrative was treated, all this type of thing. But I feel strongly that we're losing a lot of civil liberties in this country right now in the current circumstances. And I think what frightens me the most is that I don't think people will realize what they've lost until it's gone. And in several years, people will wonder what the hell happened and we used to live in a free country. And if they still let me be on the air, I'll be the one sitting there being like, well, there was an opportunity to prevent that from happening. We missed it. So now, we're living in a much odder regime. And a lot of my friends on the right wing will come along and say, "Well, look at what happened to conservatives on social media." I said, "Ah, you're not wrong, but there's an important distinction. One was done by private companies, the other's being done by the state." Very different distinction of who's being censored or deplatformed or shadow banned or whatever it is. I do not care what private platforms do for themselves. I care very much what the government does. Great
Yeah,
deal.
no. And what's very alarming is in prior administrations, the amount of involvement from the executive branch in particular to dictate to private businesses such as Meta, which at the time was Facebook,
Yeah.
what they can get away with and what they can't. And one of the biggest things that we should all be outraged is it doesn't matter what your political side is, and you're going to disagree with me more if you're against that political ideology. But when Hunter Biden and his laptop came out, and the New York Post wrote about it,
Yeah.
and this was a major event just for freedom of speech, we knew it was
Mhm.
true. Everyone knew it was true, but you
Yeah.
couldn't report it. If you reported it on Facebook, you got shadow banned. You got removed and shadow
Mhm.
banned
Yeah.
as an extremist. Another thing about religious freedom of speech that we didn't realize we don't have anymore is during the COVID epidemic, we were led to believe, we were forced to believe that although that there was this lab that tested the specific virus that became an epidemic or across the world, it didn't come from there. It came from these wet markets down the street when they knew all likelihood, but you couldn't question that.
Mhm.
Why couldn't you question that? Then these masks that we found out 6 feet apart that was a made up number. Then you find out that Fauci was on the board, I believe, of Pfizer, making millions and millions of dollars. I mean, and at the expense that we couldn't speak up and against that because we were no longer given our freedom of speech. And I think we could have two choices. We have two options, really. We can continue going down that path, or we can say, this is enough. We've seen what the government can do, the suppression of common sense. I mean,
Yes.
you want to talk about another thing is election laws and election fraud. Can't go on AI. I was trying to give an article, and I was trying to write an article about um, where President Trump's position on how the election was stolen. And the response was it wasn't stolen. So I had to cheat the system and say, pretend the system was stolen. Where would it have been stolen from?
Yeah.
You can't even argue the other side anymore because they said that's not truth. And there is I think under the Biden administration, they created you know, a group of people who declare what the truth is and what the truth isn't. I mean, that sounds very concerning. It's Orwellian, as they say, but that's the stuff. Whether you want to say that no, this is nonsense. There was no election fraud. You should have the ability and freedom to say, I think, my opinion, that there were too many anomalies. For example, why did more pe black people vote for for Biden than ever for Obama? Why can't you ask those questions? That's the suppression of free speech. And
No, I
what's
was the first one to say, I said, do you want to know how we know we don't want government in the business of free speech? We got a taste of that during COVID. And the Biden administration was foul for, especially with Twitter, with trying to shut down people over vaccine stuff and all this type of thing. I said, we got a small taste of that during COVID and how that narrative was managed. And that proves the point. We do not want government anywhere near the business of controlling who's saying what for how. And that comes as someone who analyzes news narratives every week, Mondays at 7, the Cameron's Roll News Hour. All this sort of thing. And there's a lot of narratives I do not like. And I'll tell people I am not a fan of the current administration. I never voted for this man. Most of us in my family did, but I did not vote for this man. I don't like most of what happens when Trump is in office. I wasn't a huge fan of Joe Biden when he announced for president. My first words out of my mouth were, "Oh God, the DNC is going to make me vote for Joe Biden." God damn it! Like it was sort of thing. Like that was my reaction to the Biden candidacy. It's like not necessarily a huge fan of these things, but here's one thing I do know: I do not care who's in office. I don't care if we decide to elect Mickey Mouse to be president tomorrow with Goofy as vice president. I do not want government anywhere near those things. And if you want proof, let's get on British Airways and go to London. Or we'll just call my many friends in the UK, that's cheaper. And we'll find out how not having that is going for them and be kind of like, is this a society you really want to live in? I would much, much rather spend my time fighting the wrong news narrative, convincing people of something, presenting evidence, all this type of thing, than trying to fight government who's actively suppressing this sort of thing. And that is, I think that's the one thing that's most concerning, especially I'm a bit of a radical free speech person. I may not like what you're saying, but I will defend your right to say it. And the government has
Exactly.
gotten far, 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 far too close to that. On multiple fronts and in multiple administrations, this is unfortunately delightfully bipartisan, and it's worth fighting against because we do not want to live in a society where that can simply happen. It's not good. It's not good. Just for a functioning democracy, a functioning body politic, all this type of thing. I'm not thrilled with social media companies. I'm not thrilled with algorithms. I think algorithms are incredibly manipulative. Indeed, the people, if you own a social media company or you're the head of a company that owns a social media brand, you have more power over public opinion than Horace Greeley, William Randolph Hearst, or any newspaperman of the 20th century. You have more
Mhm.
influence than the great monarchs of Europe. Um, Five people have more power to change the thought of billions than have ever had before in human history.
Yeah.
I don't think our political and
And
legal system is prepared for that reality. And I think that's why we're so
no.
moribund is we don't know how to deal with five people having that much power.
Yeah, no, I know. I agree with you completely. And we may not see eye to eye on some political ideas, and I will I feel like I find that like I think it's very important though to have more conversations with people who challenge your ideas and support your ideas. And we as society has gotten so um, split. You're either for Trump or against Trump. Then, and you can't look past, there's a lot of things that you may not agree with, but you have to ask yourself, are we better as a country because of this, or are we worse? And for the most part, I think we're a much better country, but only time will tell because you have to threaten and risk, the issues that we're uncovering right now. I mean, with Venezuela, with Iran, with Greenland. It's a lot of changes going on really quickly. It doesn't mean I support every single thing, but what it means is that this country is changing, and we have to understand what the reasons are. And if we don't do this, I mean, what's the other consequence? For example, why did Russia decide to attack Ukraine? Was it because they saw our vulnerability, or was it because of something else? And Reagan said, peace through force, through power. I mean, that's the reality of it. Otherwise, you appease everybody. Um, And those who you appease are the ones that are going to take everything away from you. And to give you a perfect example, there's that movement, Queers for Palestine. If a queer lived in Palestine, they would be murdered. It makes no sense. But yet the narrative supports that cause. It's kind of incredible. And you have to think who's behind all these things and who's those five people. They're getting people to do things that they don't really even care about. I mean, I have a show on a conservative news network called Real America's Voice. It's every Saturday at 4 o'clock. It's called A Case for America, and it just highlights the cases that we're covering, we're helping, we're representing. We're trying to protect this nation on, and it just gives a good understanding of what we're doing. And one of the things that we had recently is in Nigeria with with mass murders of Christians that are, you know, thousands upon thousands, and the news don't even talk about it. Like most people in America are unaware of that, and it's not even a concern. And why is that? Why are they suppressing that? Why is that irrelevant? And yet Palestine is. It just, why do we select one group's problem and ignore another group's problem? And why is it when it's Christians that are the party that's being persecuted, is that often ignored? You have to ask these questions. What's the agenda? And why aren't we doing anything? Why aren't we fired up about that? Yet we can, you know, get all these people to interfere with ICE raids, but yet um, hundreds of thousands of people are getting killed, and there's not even a single fundraiser on TV. When I was a kid, I'm dating myself, I'm 48, there was yes, starvation, a famine in Africa, and all the singers created that song. You remember We Are the World?
We Are the World.
Yeah.
I'm 38. That's a little bit before my time, but I'm aware. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I remember because I was in second or third grade, and my teacher danced on her desk. She was a little crazy with high heels. I remember it like it was yesterday. But
That's
but the
amazing.
whole point was that we all united for a cause that was affecting everybody, and wasn't even affecting us here. It was affecting us in affecting the world in Africa. You get people to unite, but who gets to pick and choose what is that issue, and why is that the issue du jour? And why do people care so much about um, suppression of ideas here, but they'll fight to the death on something that has nothing to do with them whatsoever, but they are willing to put their life in a line, just like what's happened in Minnesota, Minneapolis, for causes that wouldn't really affect them. But what's getting them, what's causing the outrage? And the same thing on January 6th. Just take the other side. What caused people? I don't think majority of those people who walked in the Capitol building had any intent to destroy or overthrow the government. I thought that they thought in their own minds, rightfully or wrongfully, that they were just protesting peacefully. Um, but what would cause people to go past that level? Like who's causing people to do such crazy things that we don't have any decorum in society anymore? And
Yeah.
I think you could argue a lot with January 6th was the suppression of free speech. I think people didn't feel like their voice was going to get heard. They thought the election was stolen, and they really got irate. I mean, the one thing we don't understand, I don't understand how there are more black people that voted for Biden than voted for Obama both times, both terms. So, I mean, some jurisdictions it was exceptionally high. So maybe we don't have the evidence for election fraud, but we should have the ability to ask questions and not have the whole media label you as a domestic terrorist for thinking that way. Rather open the files. I mean, and then we have this thing called the Freedom of Information Act. It should be called the Freedom to Redact Act, because everything that you will ever get is going to be redacted.
Yeah.
So, and under the Obama administration, he decided anything that was a part of the executive branch was never going to get released. And if it was released, it was all redacted. And yet the courts do nothing. And then we ask
Yeah.
questions like, why did people go after President Trump, all these people to put him in jail? And yet, how did the Clintons keep getting away with things? Why aren't we, open to a debate as to if one is guilty, why isn't the other? Why do we have selective treatment? I mean, there's a lot of things that's scary about this country. Another thing, why does the Department of Justice, you know, promote that they have over a 95, I think it's a 98% conviction rate. So if you're charged for a federal crime, 95% of the time, if not 98% of the time, you're going to be guilty. Either you're going to take a plea or you're going to be found guilty. Does that mean that every party that's accused of a crime, 95% of the time they're really guilty? Or is it because the government has so much overreach that they can get you behind bars or to agree to do a crime that you didn't commit?
They also
Yeah.
don't take cases they don't think they can lose, which unfortunately means a lot of marginal cases that could go either way end up not getting prosecuted because there's not enough evidence they don't think they'll win and it gets dropped. Which is great
Cameron,
if
I
you're
would
the
have agreed
criminal
with
getting
that.
away, but not so great for society.
I would have agreed with that until the things that are coming on my desk, and we're working with very interesting cases that there's really what's going on here. It's like we have this one case, and thank God for AI to simplify this case. This woman, a mother, has a child, a problematic child that was going through a sex reassignment surgery, among other problems before that, and she thought that the state of California was just brainwashing him, and it wasn't in his best interest. So, with the understanding of a court order it being in place or going in place that says she can't leave the state with him, she defied that to protect him. Meanwhile, the kid has not had a gender reassignment surgery and she's now going to go to jail potentially for 2 years. But what made this woman guilty is because the judge decided you can't provide any of this evidence. If I told you the evidence, you'd say, "Oh my God."
Right.
Because if you are in that woman's position, you do exactly the same thing. And
Yeah.
what I equate it to is take a pool, like a swimming pool, and it says under no circumstances will running be tolerated. Meanwhile, there's a child drowning in the pool. You see it, you run, you dive in, you break the rules, you ran, but you saved the
Right.
child's life. Now they charge you for breaking the rules. You ran. And then you say, well, I had a good justified reason. But they say you can't use that. And they present, well, the intent was to get to the water faster. So therefore, under the law, you're guilty. So what we're seeing right now, it's not even the jury, it's what the judge who has a preconceived position as to what outcome he or she wants protects what information can and cannot be used to present your case. Nobody's talking about that. That's what we're
Yeah.
seeing.
No, no, I appreciate that. We're over time. I told you 45 minutes and we're almost
Yeah.
at the hour. So, but
Yeah.
no, but thank you for coming by. Thank you for the conversation. This is the part of the show where we do plugs. Why don't you let us know where we can keep up with you, find you online and follow you along.
Absolutely. Again, my name is Evan Turk. If you need to hire me to protect your wealth, I'm admitted to practice in the great state of Florida and the once great state of New Jersey. Turk Law Group is my website and the law firm. If you have a civil justice situation where First Amendment is most important and you feel like your First Amendment rights or issues that are coming about that you want to discuss, we are the American Rights Alliance, AmericanRightsAlliance.org, or find us on your favorite social media at it's usually at Donate ARA or at ARA Donate, depending on which social media it is. And don't be a stranger, we're here to help.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming on the Cameron Journal podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
That's all for this episode of the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Visit us online at CameronJournal.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I love to talk to my followers and listeners, so please feel free to get us on social media at Cameron Cowan on Twitter. and we'll see you next time on the Cameron Journal podcast.